It was the middle of the night, and I was jolted awake. At first, I wasn't sure why, maybe a bad dream or the usual anxiety that crept in during late hours. But something was different this time. My room felt unnervingly still, almost like the air had thickened. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. Panic surged through me as I realized I was completely paralyzed, frozen in place, my limbs unresponsive no matter how much I struggled. My eyes darted around the room, the only part of me I could control. Everything looked the same as it always did: my phone on the bedside table, the soft glow of the street lamp through the curtains, the familiar hum of the house in the quiet night. But something was wrong. Very wrong. A pressure built on my chest, slowly at first, then heavier, until it felt like something or someone was sitting on me, crushing the air from my lungs. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, my heart pounding as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Then, I saw it. At the foot of my bed, a shadow moved, slow, deliberate. My eyes widened in terror as the figure emerged from the darkness, a shape that didn't belong in the waking world. It wasn't human, not really. Its outline was distorted, hunched over, almost crawling, with limbs too long and thin, like it had been stretched into something grotesque. Its eyes, large, dark pits, seemed to stare straight into me, even though they didn't shine or reflect any light. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, just a trick of my mind, but the fear was too real. I could feel it, the suffocating weight on my chest, the icy chill that filled the room. And then the thing moved closer. It slithered up the bed, slowly, deliberately, as if it had all the time in the world. My heart raced faster, pounding in my ears. The closer it got, the more I could make out its features: ragged, gaunt, with a gaping mouth that seemed to grin, teeth jagged and unnaturally long. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would go away, that I would wake up. But the pressure on my chest grew unbearable, and I felt its weight shifting on top of me, its long, bony fingers brushing against my arm, then creeping toward my throat. I could feel its breath, cold, sharp, like ice against my face. In that moment, I was sure I was going to die. Suddenly, everything stopped. The weight lifted, the cold dissipated, and my body jolted as I was able to move again. I gasped for breath, sitting up abruptly and scanning the room. The figure was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. But I knew what I had seen. And it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my window, casting warm rays across my bed. I blinked at the brightness, still shaken from the horrors of the night before. It felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't quite shake off. I glanced around my room, half expecting the shadowy figure to reappear in the daylight, but there was nothing, only the familiar clutter of my everyday life. I took a deep breath, trying to push the panic from the night away, but it lingered like a ghost at the edge of my mind. Was it a dream? Had I really seen something? The remnants of fear coiled tightly in my chest. As the day dragged on, I forced myself to go through the motions: work, social interactions, mundane tasks. I told myself it was just a figment of my imagination, a side effect of stress and exhaustion. But deep down, I knew the truth: something had visited me in the night, and it would return. When I got home that evening, I decided to research sleep paralysis. I dove into forums and articles, desperate to find others who had experienced what I had. The stories I read were eerily similar to my own. Many described the sensation of weight on their chests, the inability to move, and the presence of a dark figure hovering nearby. Some referred to it as a sleep paralysis demon, an ancient term that sent chills down my spine. I wasn't alone, but that was little comfort. As night approached, dread settled over me. I tried to distract myself with TV shows, keeping the lights on as long as possible. But as midnight drew near, I felt a heaviness envelop me, the kind that signals it's time to sleep. I tried to push through it, but the exhaustion clawed at me, and eventually, I surrendered. This time, I tried to prepare myself. I repeated calming phrases in my mind, convinced that if I stayed aware of what was happening, I could combat the darkness. But as soon as I slipped into sleep, the familiar sensation returned. I awoke, unable to move, dread filling my chest. Panic rose, but I fought to stay calm, telling myself that I had faced this before. As my eyes darted around the room, I felt it again, the chilling weight pressing down on me. And there it was. At the foot of my bed, the figure emerged from the shadows, more defined than before. It moved closer, its movements fluid and predatory, the twisted grin stretched unnaturally wide. I could see its teeth glint in the low light, like sharpened knives ready to tear through flesh. I closed my eyes tightly, willing it away, whispering frantic prayers in my mind. The weight on my chest intensified, and I felt its icy fingers brushing against my skin again. But this time, I didn't want to succumb to fear. "Get away from me!" I screamed internally, pouring all my willpower into breaking free. To my surprise, it worked. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, I forced my body to respond, breaking the paralysis. My eyes flew open, and I shot up, gasping for air, the room swirling around me. The figure was gone again, but I knew it wouldn't be the last time I'd see it. Over the following days, the encounters became more frequent. Each time, I braced myself, trying to maintain control, but the fear gnawed at me like a parasite. I documented every experience in a journal, each entry filled with dread and confusion. I learned that the creature thrived on my fear, and with every encounter, I felt my sanity slip a little more. I began to avoid sleep, staying up late into the night, trying to find ways to exhaust myself before bed. I turned to caffeine, hoping it would keep me alert, but soon I was running on fumes, and the exhaustion only fed the darkness. Then, one night, I came across a suggestion in an online forum, try confronting it. Look it in the eyes. Don't let it take your fear. The thought terrified me. But I was desperate, I needed to reclaim my life, and if that meant standing up to the shadow, I had to try. That night, I went to bed determined. As I lay in the darkness, I focused on calming my breath, repeating a mantra in my mind, I am not afraid. I am not afraid. Eventually, I drifted off into a restless sleep, but the familiar feeling of paralysis struck again. This time, however, I was ready. As I opened my eyes, the room was cloaked in darkness, and the figure loomed at the foot of my bed. I could feel the pressure building on my chest, the familiar sensation of helplessness. But instead of shutting down, I pushed against it. I forced my voice to break the silence, even if it was just a whisper. I see you. I'm not afraid of you. The figure paused, its movements momentarily stilled. I felt the weight of its gaze upon me, and for the first time, I noticed its eyes dark and hollow, but not entirely devoid of emotion. Leave me alone, I said, my voice steadier. A low growl resonated from it, a sound that sent shivers through my body. But I didn't back down. I held its gaze, the fear transforming into a strange sense of power. You don't control me anymore. In that moment, the figure lunged forward, its long fingers reaching for my throat. I braced myself for the inevitable, but instead of collapsing under the weight, I shouted, "No!" Light erupted around me, a blinding brilliance that filled the room, engulfing the figure. I felt warmth seep into my skin, washing away the cold fear that had enveloped me for so long. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the shadow dissipated, the room falling silent once more. I awoke the next morning, drenched in sweat but alive, the sunlight pouring in through my window. My heart raced, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of relief. I had faced it. I had confronted the darkness. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The battle had begun, and the demon was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next moment of weakness. The days that followed felt surreal. I had faced the demon, and yet I still woke every morning feeling a mix of triumph and terror. Each night became a challenge, a game of wits where I was determined to outsmart the dark figure that haunted my dreams. I developed a routine. I would meditate before bed, focusing on my breathing, letting my mind empty of fear. I surrounded myself with light night lights, candles, anything to push back the darkness that seemed to creep closer at night. But as the nights passed, I felt a creeping unease. The figure hadn't returned, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting, watching. I spoke with friends about my experiences, but their concerned glances made me feel like an outsider, like I was spiraling into paranoia. They offered sympathy, but they couldn't grasp the dread that settled deep within me every time the sun began to set. One evening, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I reached out to a local spiritual advisor whose name I had found in a forum dedicated to similar experiences. It was a long shot, but I was desperate for help. After a few phone calls, I scheduled a meeting. Her name was Clara, and she was unlike anyone I had ever met. When I walked into her small, cluttered shop, the air buzzed with an energy I couldn't explain. Candles flickered in every corner, filling the space with a warm glow, and the scent of herbs hung heavy in the air. Clara welcomed me with a knowing smile, her eyes shimmering with a wisdom that belied her age. After I explained my situation, she nodded thoughtfully, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "Sleep paralysis is often a symptom of something deeper," she said, her voice low and soothing. "The demon feeds on your fear, but it's also attracted to unresolved issues in your life. You need to confront not just the shadow, but the reasons it came to you in the first place." I felt a chill at her words. What unresolved issues? My life felt mundane, and I hadn't thought there was anything lurking beneath the surface. "Tell me about your life," she prompted, her gaze steady. I hesitated but then began to open up about my struggles with anxiety, the pressure I felt from work, and the loneliness that clung to me like a shadow. As I spoke, Clara listened intently, occasionally nodding as if connecting the dots between my life and the entity haunting me. After our session, she handed me a small pouch filled with herbs and crystals. "Keep this by your bedside," she instructed. "It will help protect you from the darkness. And remember, you must face your fears. Acknowledge them, and they will lose their power over you." That night, I followed her advice. I placed the pouch on my nightstand, lit a candle, and recited calming affirmations until I felt sleepy. The moment I closed my eyes, however, a weight settled over me. As I drifted into sleep, I felt that familiar tingling sensation, followed by the swift plunge into paralysis. My heart raced, and I prepared myself for the encounter, chanting Clara's words in my mind. But this time, when I opened my eyes, I found myself alone. The figure was nowhere to be seen. Relief washed over me, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Days turned into weeks, and the shadows still loomed large in my life. I kept Clara's pouch by my bedside, and the nightmares seemed to lessen in intensity. I convinced myself I had turned a corner. Until one night, the silence shattered. It was the dead of night when I awoke again, a cold sweat on my forehead. Something felt wrong. I could sense it, the air thick with foreboding. I glanced around the room, and there it was at the foot of my bed, the shadowy figure, more pronounced than before, almost as if it were gathering strength. "Why are you here?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. The creature seemed to swell in size, its grin stretching wider, almost mocking. I felt a sense of déjà vu wash over me, the suffocating pressure settling on my chest. In that moment, I understood. The paralysis was no longer just about fear, it was a game of dominance. The demon thrived on my anxiety, and I had been unwittingly feeding it. It wanted me to succumb, to lose hope. With a surge of defiance, I focused on Clara's words. I remembered the pouch beside me, the crystals and herbs. "You don't control me," I said, more firmly this time, even as it slithered closer. "I am stronger than you." The figure hesitated, its shape flickering like a candle in the wind. I didn't back down. Instead, I visualized the energy from the pouch flowing into me, a shield against its encroaching darkness. The weight on my chest began to lift. "Leave me alone," I shouted, summoning every ounce of courage I had. The figure reared back, its grotesque form beginning to dissolve into shadows. In that moment, a blinding light enveloped the room, warm and powerful. I felt a surge of energy wash over me, pushing back against the cold, dark presence. The shadow let out a shriek that pierced the silence, and then it was gone, vanishing like smoke in the wind. I awoke in a panic, drenched in sweat but alive. My heart raced as I realized I had confronted it yet again. I had pushed it away. But as I sat there, catching my breath, a cold thought crept into my mind. What if it came back stronger? I knew then that this battle was far from over. I had won a small victory, but the demon was relentless. I had to find a way to end it once and for all. After that night, the sense of victory faded into a deeper, gnawing anxiety. I had faced the demon and pushed it away, but the uneasy truce felt temporary, fragile. Each night became a countdown to an inevitable encounter, and I realized that mere defiance wasn't enough to banish it completely. Clara's words echoed in my mind, *, you must face your fears. *, but what did that truly mean? What fears lurked beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to strike? I decided I needed to delve deeper, to confront not just the demon but the source of my own anxiety. I returned to Clara, seeking her guidance once more. This time, I was prepared to explore the hidden corners of my psyche. When I entered her shop, I felt a sense of purpose, mixed with trepidation. Clara welcomed me with a gentle smile, sensing the shift in my energy. "Let's work on understanding the root of your fear," she said, leading me to a small, dimly lit room at the back of her shop. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and I could see crystals arranged in patterns on a small table. "Close your eyes and take a deep breath," she instructed. "Let your mind wander back to the moments that haunt you. Don't push them away. Acknowledge them." As I closed my eyes, I felt the familiar weight of anxiety settle in my chest. Memories flooded back, moments of failure, heartbreak, loneliness. Each memory felt like a shadow creeping into the light, whispering reminders of my insecurities. I saw images of my childhood, the times I felt abandoned or lost in a crowd. The memory of a friend's betrayal resurfaced, followed by the loss of a loved one. I could feel the pain tightening around my heart, squeezing until I could barely breathe. I began to shake, the emotions overwhelming me. Suddenly, a surge of anger coursed through me. I thought of the years wasted in fear, how it had shaped my life. "No more," I shouted internally. "I won't let you control me." In that moment of clarity, I felt a shift. The dark memories began to lose their power, dissolving into the ether. As I opened my eyes, Clara smiled knowingly. "You've begun to reclaim your power," she said softly. "Now, let's fortify that strength. We will perform a protection ritual tonight. It's time to set firm boundaries." As evening fell, I returned home, a sense of determination burning inside me. I gathered the items Clara had suggested: a bowl of salt, a white candle, and a small piece of paper to write down my intentions. I set everything up in the center of my living room, the soft glow of the candle flickering against the shadows. I lit the candle and took a deep breath, focusing on my intentions. I am strong. I am protected. I will not be a victim of fear. With each word, I felt the energy shifting in the room, I poured salt in a circle around the candle, creating a barrier, a protective shield against the darkness that threatened to invade. As night fell and I prepared for bed, I felt an unusual calm wash over me. The familiar tension in my chest was still present, but it was different, more manageable. I climbed into bed, the protection circle still vivid in my mind. But as I drifted off, the shadows crept back in. The paralysis hit again, cold and paralyzing. I opened my eyes to find the figure looming at the foot of my bed. Its presence was oppressive, the darkness thickening the air around me. This time, however, I was ready. "You won't take me," I declared, my voice firm. "I have faced my fears, and I won't let you control me." The figure paused, its eyes glinting with something that resembled surprise. It shifted, almost hesitating, as if my defiance had thrown it off balance. But then, it lunged forward, its long fingers reaching for my throat. The weight pressed down on my chest, but I pushed back against the fear, recalling the protective circle I had created. "I am protected," I shouted, forcing every ounce of strength into my words. The shadow hesitated again, flickering like a dying flame. I could feel its presence straining against my resolve. "You have no power here," I shouted, channeling Clara's teachings. Suddenly, the candle in my living room flickered, a gust of wind rushing through the room, filling it with light. I felt warmth wrap around me like a cocoon, a stark contrast to the chilling darkness that surrounded the figure. The shadow screamed a sound filled with rage and desperation and began to dissolve, bits of it evaporating like smoke in the wind. With a final push, I shouted, "Leave me alone." The figure writhed as the light engulfed it, and then it was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. I woke with a start, gasping for breath, but the feeling of dread had lifted. For the first time, I felt a sense of victory that transcended mere survival. I had faced the demon again, and I had pushed it away. Yet, even as I basked in the glow of my triumph, I felt the undercurrent of fear creeping back. This wasn't just a battle, it was a war, and I knew the demon would not give up so easily. I had learned to confront my fears, but the darkness was relentless. I had to dig deeper, uncover the last remnants of fear that might still be lurking in the shadows. The days that followed my latest confrontation felt like a fragile truce. Each morning, I woke with the knowledge that I had driven the demon away, but the shadows still loomed, and I could sense its lingering presence. I had become acutely aware of how my fear fed it, yet I needed to understand its origins, to discover what had drawn it into my life in the first place. I spent hours sifting through my journal entries, hoping to unearth patterns or themes that could offer insight. My past experiences, loss, betrayal, anxiety, each echoed through the pages like a relentless chorus. One entry caught my attention. It detailed a vivid dream I'd had as a child about a shadowy figure that would visit me at night, just as it did now. I shivered at the memory. I had always thought it was a product of my overactive imagination, a childish fear that I had long outgrown. That night, I decided to revisit the place where it all began, my childhood home. It was a 2-hour drive, but I felt compelled to confront the past. I packed an overnight bag, taking Clara's pouch with me, as if it would serve as a talisman against the darkness that threatened to engulf me. As I drove through familiar streets, memories flooded back. The neighborhood had changed since I was a child, but the essence remained the same. The old oak tree where I used to play stood tall, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze. I pulled up in front of my childhood home, the modest house now seemingly smaller than I remembered. I hesitated, dread pooling in my stomach, but I couldn't turn back now. I stepped inside, the door creaking in protest, and a wave of nostalgia washed over me. The familiar sense of aged wood and worn carpets filled the air. Everything looked just as I remembered, but it felt different, haunted. As night began to fall, I settled into my old bedroom, the very room where I had encountered that shadowy figure so many years ago. The walls, painted in pastel colors, were adorned with pictures and childhood memorabilia, yet the atmosphere felt thick, charged with unspoken memories. I set up the pouch by my bedside, lit a candle, and sat cross-legged on the floor. I closed my eyes, focusing on my breathing, determined to delve deeper into the roots of my fear. I allowed my mind to wander, to drift back to the child I once was, feeling lost and afraid. Suddenly, the air shifted, and the familiar sensation of paralysis washed over me. I opened my eyes, the darkness enveloping me, and there it was, the figure looming at the foot of my bed, more tangible than ever. But this time, I was ready. I refused to cower. "Show me who you are," I commanded, my voice resonating with newfound strength. To my surprise, the figure began to morph, its edges blurring and shifting. The darkness twisted and contorted, revealing fragments of memories, an image of a little girl, tears streaming down her face, standing alone in the corner of a dimly lit room. It clicked, this was me. I was reliving my childhood fears, the feelings of abandonment and isolation that had plagued me. The shadow represented not just my fears but the pain I had buried deep within, emotions I had never allowed myself to confront. "Why do you haunt me?" I demanded, feeling the weight of the past pressing down. The figure flickered, and I could almost hear the whispers of my childhood, faint echoes of loneliness and heartache. It dawned on me, this wasn't just a demon, it was a manifestation of my unresolved trauma, a representation of everything I had feared and tried to forget. "I won't let you control me anymore," I shouted, channeling my inner strength. "You are a part of my past, but you do not define me." The figure recoiled, its form twisting as if struggling against my words. "I am not afraid of you," I repeated, clenching my fists as I fought against the darkness. The candle's flame flickered, illuminating the room with a warm glow that pushed back against the shadows. With every ounce of courage, I faced the figure, allowing the warmth of my acceptance to fill the space. "You are my fear, but I am stronger than you," I declared. As I spoke those words, the figure began to dissolve, the darkness dissipating like fog in the sunlight. I felt a surge of relief wash over me, the weight lifting from my chest as the shadow vanished completely. In that moment, I understood I had confronted the source of my fear and reclaimed my power. The journey wasn't over, but I had taken a significant step toward healing. As I awoke the next morning, the sun streamed through the window, casting golden rays across my room. The heaviness that had plagued me for so long felt lighter, as if a veil had been lifted. I glanced around, half expecting to see the figure lurking in the corners, but the room felt serene, filled with warmth and light. I drove back home with a newfound sense of freedom, the shadows that had once held me captive now seeming less intimidating. I had faced my fears and embraced my past. The demon might return, but now I understood it for what it was, a remnant of my past, a shadow I had the power to control. Back in my own space, I decided to continue my journey of healing. I started therapy, committed to unpacking the trauma that had shaped my life. I learned to embrace the emotions I had long buried and, over time, the shadows began to fade. Yet, despite my progress, I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't over. As the days turned to weeks, I continued to confront my fears, but I remained vigilant. Each night, I practiced grounding techniques and filled my space with light. And while I had experienced a profound shift, a part of me knew that the darkness was always lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness. But I was ready. I would not let fear dictate my life any longer. The next time the demon returned, I would be stronger, armed with the knowledge of my own resilience. Weeks passed, and I found myself caught in a delicate balance between progress and the lingering shadow of anxiety. My therapy sessions became a sanctuary, a space where I could safely explore my past and confront the emotions that had been buried for so long. Clara's pouch remained by my bedside, a reminder of the strength I had summoned to confront my fears. One evening, after an intense therapy session where I had unearthed childhood memories of rejection and loneliness, I returned home feeling emotionally drained yet strangely invigorated. I sat on my bed, flipping through my journal, searching for threads of hope amid the darker entries. As I wrote, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The room felt stifling, and the familiar sense of dread settled over me like a heavy blanket. I glanced around, the shadows creeping in from the corners as the sun dipped below the horizon. Just as I was about to dismiss my unease, I noticed something on the floor, a small, crumpled piece of paper. I picked it up, my heart racing as I recognized my handwriting from years ago. The words were disjointed, a frantic scrawl that spoke of nightmares and fears that had once felt insurmountable. Suddenly, the air thickened, and I felt a chill wrap around me, causing the hairs on my arms to stand on end. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch and writhe, and a wave of panic washed over me. Not again. I closed my eyes, trying to calm my racing heart, but the weight of dread pressed down on me like an iron shroud. I could hear a soft whisper, barely audible but unmistakably taunting. "You cannot escape me." I opened my eyes, and there it was, the figure standing at the foot of my bed, more defined than ever. Its presence was overwhelming, and I could feel my pulse quickening, the primal instinct to flee clawing at my mind. But I remembered my therapy sessions, the tools I had learned to combat anxiety. I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the moment. "You are a part of my past," I said, my voice trembling but determined. "You do not control me." The figure hesitated, its shape flickering as if unsure. But I could feel the darkness pressing in, seeking to overwhelm me. I remembered Clara's teachings, I had to face it, not just push it away. "Why are you here?" I demanded, forcing myself to hold its gaze. "What do you want from me?" To my shock, the figure shifted, transforming once more. Its edges blurred, and I saw flashes of memories, moments of shame, doubt, and heartbreak. I realized with horror that this demon was feeding on my insecurities, the remnants of pain I had yet to fully confront. "I will not let you take me down this path again," I shouted, feeling the anger bubbling to the surface. "You are nothing but a reflection of my fear." The figure recoiled, a low growl emanating from it, a mix of anger and desperation. "You can't escape your truth," it hissed. "You think you're stronger, but you are still weak." I felt the words pierce through me, hitting a nerve I thought I had buried. The memories surged again, my fears of failure, the weight of expectations, the loneliness that had haunted me for so long. But instead of succumbing, I chose to stand firm. "I am not defined by my past," I yelled, channeling all the strength I had found over the past weeks. "You are not my truth." The candle on my nightstand flickered violently, and I could feel the warmth spreading through the room. The figure writhed, the shadows around it twisting like smoke in a windstorm. "You think this light will save you," it sneered, advancing closer. I focused on the pouch beside me, remembering the protective energy Clara had infused in it. I reached for it, feeling the weight of the crystals in my palm, grounding myself in the present. "I am stronger than my fears," I declared, feeling the energy swell within me. With newfound determination, I envisioned the light radiating from the pouch, enveloping me in a protective cocoon. "You do not belong here," I shouted, pushing back against the darkness. The figure let out a piercing shriek as the light expanded, illuminating every corner of the room. The shadows shrank away, and I could see the figure faltering, its form becoming increasingly transparent as the light pushed it back. "Leave me," I commanded. "You have no power over me." With one final roar, the figure dissolved into nothingness, evaporating like mist in the sunlight. I collapsed onto my bed, panting heavily, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I had confronted it again and won, but the victory felt bittersweet. I realized that the demon was not just a singular entity, it was a manifestation of all the pain I had yet to fully address. The battle would not be over until I unraveled the knots of my past and learned to forgive myself for the pain I had endured. As I lay in bed, the remnants of fear began to fade, replaced by a flicker of hope. I could feel the weight of my journey lifting, and I resolved to keep moving forward, to continue seeking healing and understanding. The following day, I reached out to Clara, eager to share my experience and seek her guidance on the path ahead. I needed to confront the deeper layers of my trauma and learn to embrace the light within me. The day after my confrontation with the shadow felt like a turning point. I awoke to the morning sun pouring through my bedroom window, casting warm rays that chased away the remnants of the night's darkness. Though I felt drained, a sense of empowerment bubbled beneath the surface. I was no longer just a victim of my fears, I was ready to reclaim my narrative. I called Clara and shared the details of my experience. "It feels like the shadow is a part of me," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "But I pushed it away. I confronted it." "That's a significant step," Clara responded, her voice calm and reassuring. "But remember, it's essential to understand the root of your fears, the experiences that shape them. You must learn to integrate these parts of yourself." She invited me to come in for a special session that afternoon. As I drove to her shop, the familiar sense of unease began to creep back, but I pushed it aside. I was determined to continue my journey toward healing. Upon arriving, I was greeted by Clara's warm smile. "Today, we will explore the concept of integration, bringing the fragmented parts of your past into a cohesive whole," she explained as we settled into her cozy, inviting space filled with plants and the scent of essential oils. Clara guided me through a series of exercises designed to connect with my inner child, the scared, vulnerable version of myself that still held onto past traumas. As I closed my eyes, I visualized myself as a child, small and scared, standing alone in the corner of my old room, the very room where the shadow had visited me. "Let that child know she is safe," Clara instructed gently. "Remind her that you are here for her now." With every breath, I felt my heart begin to soften. I imagined kneeling down to my younger self, wrapping my arms around her. "You are not alone anymore," I whispered in my mind. "I am here. You are safe." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I allowed the emotions to surface, years of pain, loneliness, and heartache pouring out. I felt the warmth of acceptance enveloping both me and my younger self, merging our experiences into a single moment of healing. After the session, I felt lighter, but I knew there was still work to be done. That evening, I returned home, a quiet resolve settling within me. I wanted to continue this path of self-discovery, and the first step was to confront the memories I had long buried. I sat on my bed with my journal, reflecting on the moments that had shaped me, the betrayals, the losses, and the pain. As I wrote, a pattern began to emerge. Each memory I documented revealed not just sorrow but lessons learned, strengths gained, and moments of resilience I had overlooked. A sense of catharsis washed over me as I processed these experiences, transforming them from burdens into stories of survival. I began to recognize that the shadow wasn't merely a symbol of my fears, it was also a reminder of my journey, a testament to my strength in overcoming obstacles. But as I delved deeper, I felt the familiar chill creeping back into the room. My heart raced as I looked around, half expecting the shadow to materialize once more. I took a deep breath, determined not to let fear paralyze me. "Show yourself," I called out, my voice firm. "If you are here, I am ready." The air thickened, and soon enough, the figure appeared dark and imposing, just as it had before. But this time, I stood my ground. "You are a part of my past," I asserted, feeling the warmth of my newfound strength. "You do not control me." The figure seemed to flicker, its form wavered as if it were unsure. "You think you have the power," it hissed, but I could hear a note of uncertainty in its voice. "Yes," I shouted, feeling the light within me swell. "I have faced you, and I will continue to face you until you no longer have any hold over me." With each word, the light grew brighter, illuminating the darkness around me. The shadows began to shrink, and I could see flashes of my past moments of despair but also moments of joy and triumph. The duality of my experiences became clear, every shadow contained a light. The figure hesitated, its form flickering as if caught between worlds. "You cannot escape your truth," it whispered again, but this time there was a quiver in its tone. "I am not afraid of my truth," I declared. "I embrace it. You are part of my journey, but you do not define who I am." With that proclamation, the light surged, radiating warmth and acceptance throughout the room. The figure let out a final, anguished cry before dissolving into the air, leaving behind only a faint echo. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, a culmination of all the battles I had fought. As I sat in the silence, I realized that I had transformed my relationship with the shadow. It was no longer just a demon to fear, it was a reflection of the complex tapestry of my experiences, both light and dark. I lay in bed, reflecting on my journey. The battle was not over, but I felt more equipped to face whatever lay ahead. I had faced the darkness, embraced my truth, and recognized the light within me. This journey was mine to shape, and I was determined to continue embracing every part of myself. I closed my eyes, allowing the remnants of the day to settle, ready to dream of brighter tomorrows. Days turned into weeks, and I continued my journey of healing, each step bringing me closer to understanding and accepting all parts of myself. The shadows that once felt so oppressive began to recede, their power diminishing with every confrontation. My journal overflowed with reflections and insights, serving as both a cathartic release and a roadmap for my growth. Despite the progress, a lingering sense of foreboding hung in the air. I could feel it in the way the clouds gathered ominously outside my window and the way the winds howled through the trees. It was as if the universe was warning me that another storm was brewing, one I wasn't quite prepared for. One evening, after an intense therapy session, I returned home feeling both uplifted and anxious. As I settled into bed, the familiar chill washed over me, sending a shiver down my spine. It was too quiet, too still. I reached for Clara's pouch, seeking comfort in its presence, but a sense of dread enveloped me like a heavy fog. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the anxiety, but it felt as though the walls were closing in. I summoned the light within me, reminding myself of the strength I had cultivated over the past weeks. I envisioned the warmth surrounding me, but as I opened my eyes, the shadow loomed larger than ever. This time, it wasn't just a figure, it felt like a storm had gathered around it, dark clouds swirling, thunder rumbling in the distance. "You think you're free," it snarled, its voice echoing with a thunderous resonance. "You have only just begun to scratch the surface." My heart raced as I stood up, grounding myself in the moment. "I am not afraid of you," I shouted, my voice steady. "I know you're a part of me, but I will not let you control my life." The shadow surged forward, its form twisting violently, as if the storm around it was feeding off my fear. I could feel the panic rising, but I remembered Clara's teachings, embracing the light, acknowledging the fear, but not letting it consume me. "Show me what you truly are," I demanded, my voice rising above the din. "Reveal yourself." With that, the shadow began to shift, revealing glimpses of my past moments of deep sadness, isolation, and failure, but intertwined with flashes of hope, laughter, and resilience. The storm surged around us, but I felt a surge of strength within me. "You are not just pain," I shouted, feeling my heart race. "You are also my growth, my survival." The figure hesitated, flickering as if caught between my fear and my acceptance. "You can't change what has happened," it hissed, but I could sense the uncertainty in its voice. "True," I acknowledged, feeling the light within me pulse. "But I can change how I let it affect me. I will not be bound by my past. You are a part of my journey, but you do not define me." As I spoke those words, the storm around the figure began to abate. The shadows started to recede, and the flickers of light grew brighter. I felt the warmth enveloping me, radiating outwards like a beacon, pushing back against the darkness. With each declaration of my strength, the figure shrank, its form becoming less substantial. "You are just a memory," I shouted, my voice ringing clear and strong. "I am the one who holds the power now." The figure let out a howl, a sound of desperation mixed with anger, as it began to dissolve. The storm clouds dissipated, and the oppressive darkness lifted, leaving behind a profound sense of clarity. As the last remnants of the shadow vanished, I felt an overwhelming wave of relief wash over me. I had faced the storm and emerged on the other side, my spirit unbroken and emboldened. But as the tranquility settled around me, a sense of foreboding crept back in. I couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation was only the beginning. The shadow was no longer just a demon lurking in the dark, it was a reflection of my struggles, a reminder of the battles I still had to face. The next day, I met Clara again for another session. I shared the details of my encounter and the lingering sense of unease that followed. "It feels like I've won a battle, but the war isn't over," I admitted, my voice laced with concern. Clara nodded, her expression serious. "You're right. Confronting your fears is a continuous journey. Each layer you peel back reveals more complexity. But remember, every victory strengthens you. The key is to keep facing those shadows, to keep embracing the light." Her words resonated with me as I left her shop, determination fueling my steps. I would not back down. I would continue to confront the demons of my past, to seek understanding and acceptance. That evening, I decided to confront the memories that still haunted me, the feelings of rejection from friendships that had crumbled, the isolation I had felt during difficult times, and the doubts that clouded my self-worth. I sat in my room, surrounded by the comforting light of candles, and began to write. As I documented each memory, I felt the familiar chill seep back into the room. The atmosphere shifted, and I sensed the shadows gathering again. But this time, I was ready. I wouldn't allow them to overpower me. "Come out," I commanded, my voice steady. "Show yourself." The shadow appeared once more, but this time, I was not afraid. "You think you can scare me?" I declared. "You are merely a reflection of my fears, and I choose to face you." The figure flickered, hesitating as I confronted it with unwavering determination. I could see the moments of pain and rejection swirling around, but alongside them, I also felt the strength of my journey. "I embrace my past," I said, my voice steady. "But it does not control me. I am the one who decides my future." With each word, the shadows around me began to dissolve, giving way to the light within me. The figure shrank, its voice growing fainter. "You may think you've won," it hissed, "but I will always be here." "Yes, you will," I replied, my tone resolute. "But you are a part of my story, not the author. I will not let you dictate my life." As the shadow dissipated, I felt a surge of hope and empowerment. I understood that the journey would continue, but I was no longer the same person I had once been. I had faced the darkness, and I was ready to embrace the light. In the days that followed, I embraced the evolving landscape of my healing journey. The shadows no longer haunted my every step, but they lingered in the periphery, reminders of the battles I had fought and the ones still ahead. Each night, I would confront them in my dreams, but with a newfound sense of empowerment. The journal continued to fill with reflections, insights, and moments of clarity, serving as both a sanctuary and a record of my evolution. One evening, I decided to revisit the places that had once been significant to my pain. I wanted to reclaim those spaces, to transform them from sources of dread into reminders of my strength. I started with the old playground where I had spent countless hours as a child, often feeling isolated and left out. As I walked through the rusted gates, memories flooded back, moments of laughter mixed with stinging loneliness. I could see the faces of friends who had come and gone, leaving me feeling abandoned. But instead of despair, I felt a quiet determination wash over me. This place does not define me, I whispered to myself. I define my story. I sat on a swing, letting my legs dangle as I absorbed the surroundings. The cool breeze caressed my skin, a gentle reminder of the present moment. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, allowing myself to feel the weight of the past while embracing the light of the present. In that moment, I envisioned my younger self joining me, swinging beside me, filled with laughter and joy. "Look at how far we've come," I murmured to her, a smile creeping onto my face. "We are not alone anymore." With renewed strength, I stood up and left the playground behind, feeling lighter. I knew I still had more memories to confront, more shadows to chase away. The next stop was the coffee shop where I had once felt an overwhelming sense of rejection, sitting alone while friends gathered and laughed around me. As I stepped inside, the familiar sense of roasted coffee and baked goods enveloped me. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter from that time, but instead of sinking into despair, I focused on the present. I ordered a coffee and chose a seat by the window, watching the world outside while sipping my drink. With each sip, I felt the warmth seep into my bones, a stark contrast to the chill I had once associated with this place. I pulled out my journal, jotting down the memories that had held me captive, detailing both the pain and the lessons learned. As I wrote, I felt a sense of release, like untying knots that had long held me back. Suddenly, I felt a familiar energy surrounding me. I looked up and gasped as a figure stepped into my line of sight, a friend from my past. Sarah, someone I hadn't seen in years, stood at the entrance, her eyes widening in recognition. We had been inseparable during high school, but our friendship had frayed due to misunderstandings and life pulling us in different directions. "Is that you?" she exclaimed, rushing over to my table. "It's been ages." "Sarah," I replied, standing to embrace her, feeling a rush of warmth as old memories flooded back. "How have you been?" As we settled into conversation, I could feel the barriers I had built slowly crumbling. We reminisced about our shared past, the laughter, the heartaches, and the moments that had drawn us apart. "I'm so sorry for how things ended between us," she admitted, her voice tinged with regret. "I wish we had communicated better." "Me too," I replied, surprised at how easy it felt to talk about it now. "But I've been working on healing and understanding the past. I've realized that we both had our struggles." As we shared our experiences, I felt the shadows of rejection and isolation beginning to dissipate. Here was someone who had shared my journey, who understood the complexities of friendship. "I'm so proud of you for how far you've come," she said, her eyes shining with sincerity. "It takes real courage to face your fears." "And I'm proud of you too," I responded, realizing how powerful this moment was. It's never too late to reconnect. After our conversation, we made plans to meet regularly, promising to support each other on our respective journeys. I felt a profound sense of relief and joy, as if a weight had been lifted. I had reclaimed not only the coffee shop but also a cherished connection. That night, I returned home with a heart full of hope. The shadows still lingered, but they no longer felt oppressive. Instead, they were reminders of the journey I had undertaken and the connections I had nurtured along the way. As I prepared for bed, I found myself reflecting on the day's events. I remembered Clara's words about integration, the need to bring together the fragmented parts of my past. I realized that I could not only embrace the light but also the lessons the darkness had taught me. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of the pouch beside me, its crystals glowing softly in the dim light. I knew that each shadow I confronted was a step toward understanding, toward healing. But just as I began to drift off, I felt the familiar chill creeping back into the room. My heart raced as I opened my eyes, and once again, the figure emerged from the shadows, but this time it felt different, more fluid, less menacing. "Here we go again," I murmured, steeling myself. What do you want now? The shadow hesitated, its form flickering uncertainly. You think you've gained control, it murmured, its voice laced with doubt. But you can't outrun your past. I'm not trying to outrun it, I replied firmly. I'm embracing it. I'm ready to integrate every part of my journey, the pain and the joy. You are just a part of that. As I spoke, I felt the light within me surge once more, illuminating the room. The figure writhed, caught between darkness and light. I could sense its confusion, as if it were struggling to reconcile its existence with the warmth that surrounded me. You cannot have power over me, I declared, feeling more resolute than ever. I am not afraid anymore. With those words, the light enveloped the shadow, pushing back against the darkness. It let out a wail, a sound of desperation mixed with something akin to acceptance, before it began to dissolve, shrinking into nothingness. I stood there, breathing heavily, the weight of the encounter lifting. I realized that the shadow was not just a representation of my fears, it was also a guide, a catalyst for my growth. The more I embraced my truth, the less hold it had over me. As the final remnants of the figure faded away, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. I had faced the darkness, embraced the light, and reclaimed my power. I lay back on my bed, a smile playing on my lips. I knew the journey was far from over, but I felt ready for whatever came next. With each passing day, I found strength in my newfound understanding of self. I embraced the light and recognized that shadows were not to be feared but acknowledged. Yet, as I settled into this empowering routine, I knew there was one more significant hurdle to overcome: forgiveness. Forgiveness was a concept I had wrestled with for as long as I could remember. I understood its importance in the healing process, yet I struggled to let go of the anger and resentment that lingered within me, especially toward those who had hurt me in the past. The memories of betrayal, abandonment, and disappointment replayed in my mind like a broken record, preventing me from fully moving forward. I made an appointment with Clara, hoping to gain insight into how to navigate this complex terrain. As I arrived at her shop, I felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. I entered, greeted by her warm smile and the soothing scent of lavender filling the air. "Welcome back," Clara said, her voice gentle. "How have you been?" "I've been doing better," I replied, sitting down on the comfortable couch. "But I realize that I need to work on forgiveness, letting go of past hurts that still affect me." Clara nodded thoughtfully. Forgiveness can be one of the most challenging aspects of healing. It's important to understand that forgiveness doesn't excuse the behavior of others, rather, it frees you from carrying that weight. As we delved into the topic, Clara guided me through a visualization exercise, asking me to envision the people I needed to forgive, including myself. I closed my eyes, allowing the names and faces to surface, the emotions swirling within me. "I want you to picture yourself standing before each person," Clara instructed. "Imagine speaking your truth, expressing how their actions affected you, and then offering them forgiveness, not for them, but for yourself." Taking a deep breath, I visualized my first target, my former best friend, Emily. The memories of her betrayal flooded back, the pain of being cast aside still raw. I pictured myself standing across from her, my heart racing. "Emily," I began, feeling the weight of unspoken words. "You hurt me deeply when you chose to turn your back on our friendship. It felt like I was nothing to you, and that pain lingered long after. I want you to know how much that affected me." As I spoke, the emotions rose to the surface: anger, sadness, and disappointment. But alongside them, I felt a glimmer of understanding. I recognized that Emily had her struggles, her demons that may have influenced her actions. "I forgive you," I continued, my voice steadying. "Not because you deserve it, but because I need to release this burden. I choose to let go of the anger I've carried for so long." In my mind, I extended my hand to her, feeling the release of pent-up emotions as a weight lifted from my chest. I opened my eyes and exhaled deeply, feeling lighter, more liberated. Clara smiled, clearly moved by the intensity of the moment. That was powerful. Now, let's address the next person on your list. I moved on to my father, who had struggled with his own demons and had often been absent during my childhood. I pictured him, the disappointment flooding my heart again. "Dad," I said softly. "I wanted you to be there for me, to show me love and support. Instead, I often felt abandoned and lost. I'm angry about how your choices affected me, how they shaped my understanding of love." The emotional weight felt heavy, but I pressed on. "But I also realize that you have your own battles. I forgive you, not for you, but for me. I need to heal." The release was profound, and I opened my eyes again, tears glistening in the corners. Clara nodded approvingly. "You're doing amazing work. This process takes time, but each step is a victory." We continued through my list, addressing each individual with honesty and vulnerability. With every person I forgave, I felt the shackles of the past begin to loosen. The shadows that had once loomed over me started to recede, replaced by a sense of clarity and peace. When I finally turned inward to confront myself, I felt a rush of emotion. "I forgive you," I whispered to my reflection in the imaginary mirror. "I forgive you for holding on to the pain, for doubting your worth, for letting fear dictate your life." The tears flowed freely as I acknowledged the hurt I had inflicted on myself through years of self-doubt and negativity. I embraced that part of me, allowing the forgiveness to wash over me like a cleansing wave. After our session, I felt lighter, as if I had shed layers of emotional weight that had clung to me for far too long. Clara smiled knowingly. "You've taken a significant step today. Remember, forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. Be gentle with yourself as you continue to navigate these feelings." That evening, I returned home, my heart feeling more expansive than it had in a long time. I sat at my desk, the moonlight streaming through the window, illuminating my journal. Inspired, I began writing about the day's revelations, how forgiveness had opened up new pathways for growth and healing. As I wrote, I felt a stirring in the air. A flicker of darkness crossed my vision, and instinctively, I looked up. The shadow reappeared, but this time it felt different, less aggressive and more subdued. "Still here, are you?" I said, my voice steady. "What do you want now?" The shadow flickered, and to my surprise, it seemed to pulse with uncertainty. "You think you can just forget," it hissed, but the edge was gone. There was a hint of something else, fear, perhaps, or maybe even respect. "No, I don't want to forget," I replied firmly. "I want to learn and grow. I am no longer afraid of you. You are a part of my past, but you do not control me." As I spoke those words, I felt the light within me surge. The shadow wavered, and for a moment, I thought I saw flickers of understanding in its dark form. "You think you can embrace me?" it whispered, its voice softer, almost pleading. "Yes," I said, my tone steady and confident. "I embrace every part of my journey, even the darkness. I'm ready to integrate you into my story, but you must accept your place. You are a part of me, but you do not define me." The figure hesitated, and I watched as the darkness began to dissolve, retreating as the light within me shone brighter. "You will not be rid of me so easily," it warned, but there was no longer a threat in its voice, just a hint of resignation. "I know," I replied, feeling a surge of compassion for this part of myself that had caused so much fear. "But I won't let you dictate my life anymore. I choose to move forward, carrying both light and shadow." With that declaration, the shadow flickered one last time before vanishing entirely, leaving behind a profound stillness in the room. I stood in the quiet, feeling a deep sense of peace wash over me. I understood now that shadows were not simply to be fought against, they were a part of the journey toward wholeness. As I lay down, I allowed myself to drift into a peaceful sleep, knowing that while the path of forgiveness was ongoing, I had taken a monumental step toward freedom. The sun rose the next morning, its warm rays filtering through my curtains, casting a golden glow in my room. I woke feeling refreshed, as if I had shed layers of weight that had been clinging to me for far too long. The shadows were still there, but they felt less daunting now, more like old friends than enemies. I decided to take a walk in the nearby park, a place that had always offered solace and serenity. As I strolled along the winding paths, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world felt vibrant, alive, and full of possibilities. Each step was a reminder that I was actively choosing to embrace life, to lean into both the light and the shadows. As I walked, I took in the sights and sounds of the park, the laughter of children playing, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the distant chirping of birds. Nature enveloped me in its beauty, and I couldn't help but smile. But as I turned a corner, I came face to face with a familiar sight that sent a jolt through me, the old oak tree where I had once carved my initials as a child. It stood tall and sturdy, just as I remembered, but I felt an immediate wave of nostalgia wash over me, accompanied by a tinge of sadness. I approached the tree, placing my hand against its rough bark. "I remember all the dreams I had here," I whispered, recalling moments of innocence and hope, but also the pain of feeling unseen. As I leaned against the tree, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the memories wash over me. "I forgive you," I said softly to the tree, recognizing it as a symbol of my past. "You held my secrets and my fears, but I am ready to let go." In that moment, a gentle breeze rustled through the branches, and I felt a warmth envelop me, as if nature itself was embracing my decision. I opened my eyes and looked around, feeling a sense of freedom bloom within me. With newfound clarity, I decided to visit the community center where I had often volunteered in the past. Giving back had always brought me joy, but I had let fear and insecurity keep me away. Now, I felt ready to step back into that space and share my journey with others. As I arrived, I was greeted by familiar faces, and the warmth of the community washed over me. I made my way to the main hall, where a group of individuals gathered for a support meeting. My heart raced, but I knew I wanted to share my story, to encourage others who might be struggling. "Hi, everyone," I said, my voice steady but slightly shaky. "I'm here to share my journey of healing. I've faced darkness and shadows, but I've learned that embracing both light and dark is essential for growth." I shared the experiences that had shaped me, my battles with self-doubt, the moments of rejection, and the importance of forgiveness. As I spoke, I watched as faces in the room shifted from skepticism to understanding, the shared connection binding us in our struggles. When I finished, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had opened my heart, and in return, I saw the glimmer of hope in others' eyes. They asked questions, shared their own experiences, and the atmosphere shifted into one of camaraderie and support. After the meeting, a few individuals approached me, expressing gratitude for my honesty. One woman, Tara, shared her own story of loss and longing. "Thank you for speaking up," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I felt so alone in my pain, and hearing your story has given me hope." In that moment, I realized that my journey was not just about my healing, it was also about creating connections and supporting others on their paths. I felt invigorated, eager to continue volunteering and to share my experiences with those who needed it most. As I left the community center, I couldn't shake the feeling of excitement bubbling within me. The shadows had transformed, they no longer felt like burdens but rather guides leading me to deeper connections and greater understanding. That evening, I sat down with my journal, reflecting on the day's events. I wrote about the power of vulnerability, how sharing our stories could forge connections that heal both the speaker and the listener. The words flowed effortlessly, my heart swelling with the knowledge that my journey could impact others in ways I had never imagined. As I prepared for bed, I felt a familiar chill in the air, but instead of fear, I welcomed it. The shadows had been quiet lately, and I sensed they were lingering, waiting for their moment to be acknowledged once more. As I closed my eyes, I welcomed the darkness, ready to face whatever it had to reveal. The room filled with a soft glow as I envisioned the light surrounding me, forming a protective barrier. In that moment of peace, the shadow materialized once more, but it felt different, less menacing, more subdued. "You think you've left me behind," it whispered, its voice echoing softly. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "You are part of my journey, a part of me. I embrace you, but you do not control me anymore." The shadow flickered, its form wavering. "You may think you have conquered me, but I will always be here." "I don't want to conquer you," I said gently. "I want to understand you. I want to learn from you. Together, we can create something beautiful." The shadow hesitated, a flicker of something unrecognizable crossing its dark surface. It pulsed with uncertainty, and I could feel the tension in the air. "Every time I confront you, I learn more about myself," I continued. "You are a part of my growth, a reminder of my strength and resilience. Together, we can forge a new path." With those words, I felt the light within me intensify, illuminating the room. The shadow began to dissolve, its form softening as it merged with the light. Perhaps I can learn too," it whispered, a hint of vulnerability emerging. "Yes," I encouraged, my heart swelling with compassion. "Together, we can find harmony." As the last remnants of darkness faded away, I felt a profound sense of peace enveloping me. I lay back, the weight of the world lifting, knowing that I had taken another step toward wholeness. The journey was far from over, but I had found a new rhythm, a dance of light and shadow, both integral to the masterpiece of my life.